When we talk about the future world of work, what we really end up talking about is the topic of disruption and just how hard it is for us to predict disruption, its origin, its scale, or its impact on our business. I think most of us in this call will be familiar with Philip Morris, the tobacco firm that owns Marlboro. Their response to disruption facing the industry is to move towards what they call a smoke-free future. That in itself is a 180-degree shift in business strategy. And you can only imagine the type of talent implications this has. Would Philip Morris 10 years ago have predicted that they'll be moving towards a smoke-free future and work towards that goal so openly? I'd argue not. I would go as far as saying that if anyone, or any firm for that matter, comes to you and tells you that they can predict the future with any degree of accuracy for over the next 5 years, they're selling hot air. COVID right now has taken center stage, but things like automation have also not gone away. At an average, 10% roles at your organizations will be at risk of being impacted by automation in the near future. So when we think about disruption, what can we do? The answer is actually quite simple. It relates to our people. A forward-looking talent strategy emphasizes workforce agility. It builds workforce resilience as a result. We foster talent that can look change confidently in the eye and is not phased by an increased rate of change. At its core, an agile and resilient workforce allows us to react at speed to disruption regardless of its source. An agile and resilient workforce has a broad skill set and an agile and lean decision-making structure, an ability to identify and manage risk, and the inherent ability to absorb change and uncertainty without impacting productivity. And that is really what today is about. How do we create agility and resilience within our respective workforces and in our specific industry context? To do so, Mark and myself have prepared an overall insight into what some of our clients are doing and have identified a number of core opportunities that allow us to accelerate our future world of work agendas. What we're looking at here are a number of stats that we collected from our clients across the globe, just to sort of give you an indication as to what our clients do in response to change, what our clients do in response to COVID, which we can sort of see as an accelerator, what we term the future world of work. So the first stat here, 77% of our clients indicated that they are actively identifying functions and roles to determine who can work virtually. Interesting here is that organizations understand that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work anymore. Roles and functions require different working arrangements. Some might need to be in the office more based on the type of data they have access to or the type of client interaction, like they're expected to have. If we go, the next one is 83% of organizations expect to have different working models as a result of COVID-19. I think there are very few days now that one of the major news outlets is not leading with a virtual working story. And oftentimes it's stressing the change desires in workers to keep a balance of the old and the new. As I came across, I was discussing quotes of the year yesterday with two of my friends, and the first one that came up that we landed on is "You're on mute," and that's probably the quote of the year for 2020, closely followed by "Your screen is not sharing." It just sort of reflects the new realities that we're all dealing with. 35% of organizations realize the need for better workforce planning models. I think that number will keep going up as organizations grapple with how to manage hybrid working models, with X percentage working from home half the time, Y percentage working in the office, and changing government guidelines around office occupancy. The other one is only 21% of organizations currently expect to have more than 76% of their current virtual workforce back in the office in 12 months' time. This partially reflects the uncertainty around what the future holds, but can also be seen as an early indication of what the new better may eventually look like. We don't need to all go down the route of a Twitter or Facebook and announce virtual working to be here forever, but changing working models certainly are a reality. And the last one I wanted to touch on is that 58% of organizations expect an accelerated focus on workforce agility and internal mobility as a result of COVID-19. Again, I would classify that as a rising trend, and I would certainly see that number continue to rise as we grapple with the fallout of COVID and start to define our new better. Mark, you wanted to share some statistics as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, everybody. So throughout today's session, I'm going to be reflecting more on that key issue John's called out about resilience and how important this attribute will be to the future workforce. In doing so, I'm going to lean a little bit here on our recently launched the Rising Resilient Report and Survey to support our commentary. So the only blatant plug for me today will be after this session, pop on the AON website and download the full report. Okay, let's take a quick step back. Workforce resilience is created where the environment at work is one in which people can better adapt to adverse situations, to manage stress better, to retain motivation. And to make the connection, strategic investment in health and wellbeing initiatives driven by clear, compassionate and visible leadership and an empathetic dialogue between employer and employee are critical to delivering workforce resilience. Against the backdrop of this global pandemic, I think businesses that are putting their people first might be better placed to thrive in the future. By creating a workplace environment that provides security, motivation, and belonging, they're going to be more able to weather this fiercest of storms and indeed whatever comes next. At its core, there are three indicators of workforce resilience: a fundamental sense of security at work, a strong sense of belonging with the employer, and having the ability and motivation you need to reach your full potential. Tactical wellbeing initiatives alone are unlikely to be enough to achieve consistent results. Resilience requires visionary leadership, a continuous dialogue with your workforce, a well-rounded program of informed and targeted actions that support diverse needs. The benefits for employers are clear. As you can see from our slide, our survey suggests that only 30% of employees can be classed as resilient, yet 93% of resilient employees say that they would want to stay with their employer. 42% of employees do not feel secure or safe at work. And 55% do not feel able to reach their full potential. But 86% of resilient employees feel fully motivated in the workplace. So workforce resilience will need, in fact, it must be placed high on your agenda, as it not only matters to your people, but it can also unlock the full potential of your organization. John, back to you.
Yeah, super. If I were to just summarize the trends we just showed, I would say the following. Companies are accelerating their change agendas to realize their new better quicker and move out of what can best be described as an environment of uncertainty. Agility is really what allows us to react at speed, and resilience is what allows us to weather out the storm, if you so will. Before we dive into a couple of case studies, we just wanted to highlight one key takeaway for you. When we think about defining the new better, we need to understand that it's a balancing act across agility, resilience, people risk, and people spend that we engage in. It's not as simple as saying we want to create an agile workforce. So, for example, moving people into a fully virtual environment can save costs, sure. But similarly, it can increase our risk profile. And unless we put the right structures and processes in place, does not necessarily foster resilience. In fact, it can negatively impact well-being if the continued lockdown has sort of taught us anything. And that is how we need to think through new better. How do we derive the optimum balance for our organization across risk, resilience, people spent, and agility? How do we take the intricacies of the industry that we operate into account, and how do we truly understand our needs? To put this into perspective, Mark and myself have prepared a couple of case studies. And the first one is from one of our clients in financial services. Here, the new better is about enabling flexible working at work. Our task in this project was to identify the right roles and function that should continue to work virtually going forward, and subsequently identify the right type of real estate footprint and associated savings for the new better bank. Only by looking at their roles, we knew that going forward, close to 78% of roles could continue to operate in a remote or a hybrid setting. Understanding the roles and their associated tasks only answers part of the question, however. We also need to understand the individual. And I think we can sort of take ourselves as examples. Not all of us are cut out to work from home for a variety of reasons, one being long-term self-motivation. For some of us, it will lead to higher levels of productivity. For some of us, it will be the reverse. And that means we need to understand the individual in the role to determine the right working model. The concept of one size fits all, therefore, and maybe finally is a thing of the past. Interesting here for the financial services firm as well is that there is a $140 million real estate play on hand by rethinking how they set up regional hubs and the potential working models offered to consolidate some of their more regionally dispersed office network. The other case study I wanted to touch on was for one of our engineering manufacturing clients, where the new better is about enabling its workforce to re and upskill at scale in the face of economic uncertainty. The client here is Siemens, and it's really about matching people through a better understanding of their strengths, their personality traits, their motivations to the right type of re and upskilling opportunities that Siemens offers as part of its future fund. They'd identified core future skills that will help the business prepare for the future. And that type of matching allows individuals or individual employees to make their own choices around which type of re and upskilling opportunity is the right one for them, and drives sort of what I would say the new way of looking at learning and development, in particular when it comes to remote working settings. Mark, you had a case study as well that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, thanks, John. Knowing that many on the call today will have reward and benefits responsibilities, a quick example of how a progressive benefit redesign could support some of these modern challenges we've been talking about today. So a leading global defence firm that we've worked with for a number of years now, we're looking to address the needs to recruit, motivate and retain a different type of worker, those much sought after skilled workers from the millennials and Generation Z. Despite already offering a strong overall benefits package, they look to overhaul this and have introduced in its place a fresh program that will be characterised by themes such as more personalisation and choice, increased use of technology, a heightened modern engagement strategy, and it's one that is underpinned by focus on all of those 5 key areas of wellbeing we talk about so often: emotional, social, physical, financial, and professional wellbeing. The data is already showing a return for the business through overall engagement rates in the high 90s, and with take-up of their innovative lifestyle account, effectively personalising the wellbeing strategy, leading the way. Back to you, John.
Super. And I think so one of our key takeaways from the work with clients has been the role data played in all of this, and how we can utilize data to help shape and enable the new better for our clients. And I think if we sort of think back to the scales from earlier, from people, agility and resilience, the right type of people data allows us to define and shape the new better in a much easier way. It allows us to rethink how decision making works across our organizations. So, for example, if our employees base their decisions on objective, compounded, and current data, can we not disperse decision making power more? Like what I talked about in the Siemens example, can we not empower employees to own their careers and learning journeys? Can that not be part of our new better? I would argue, yes, it can, and it should. And I know, Mark, you had another great example around the use case of data that allows us to quantify certain types of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of using data to drive the health strategy is no new concept, but if we reflect on John's comments and also on the findings from the Rising Resilient report I referenced earlier, we're able to reinforce the value of this message. So we know that data flows around the world of health and benefits and engagement, but using this data to inform and drive the decision-making process has never been more important, I think. As a firm, are you able to identify where you are strong and where there is still work to do? And does this apply to all or only some segments of your workforce? Our survey showed that where no wellbeing program is in place, the chart on the right here, only 15% of employees are resilient. Good quality data sources the right results, not just for your employees, but also for your business. Going live on our website in a month's time is going to be a self-assessment tool enabling you to conduct a high-level analysis of how well your current people strategy supports workplace resilience. So feel free to take a look. I'm going to quickly just touch on one last point here with my last comments. I just want to call out some themes around communication and the effectiveness of an engagement strategy, and it might present an opportunity for firms to make a quick impact in improving workplace resilience. Our survey suggested, thankfully perhaps, there are a relatively small number of employees who have no strategies in place at all for promoting healthy living or emotional well-being, or very topically in the current climate for supporting flexible working and developing new skills. However, there is a big discrepancy between the data and the feedback that calls out what percentage of the workforce believe there to be no such measures in place at their firm. This discrepancy, this communication gap, presents an immediate opportunity to improve resilience levels and demands a reassessment of communication strategy, of new mediums of technology can be used, and what messaging is coming from your company health leaders and indeed the C-suite. That was the last one for me. Just a quick wrap up from John.
Super. Yeah, so if we look at the points here on the slide, I think what we did want to leave you with is that the benefits of sort of moving towards the future world of work, accelerating our future world of work agenda certainly outweigh the risks. We don't know the next source of disruption for your business. All we can do is to make sure that we have an agile and resilient workforce in place that is able to cope with disruption regardless of its source. And just think about Encyclopedia Britannica, who used to sell, you guessed it, encyclopedias door to door. Today, they're an online education provider. And disruption comes in all shapes and sizes. All we can do is prepare, and I think that's what we wanted to leave you with. So, thank you very much.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much indeed. We've just got a little bit of time left for Q&A at the end here with John and Mark. One really interesting question we've had through is around the pandemic's impact on risk insurances. So most employers are underclaiming right now, and yet we know we're storing up huge mental and physical health problems over the coming months and years. How can we predict future risk budgets for premiums and related costs?
John, do you want me to take that one? Probably feels most appropriate, doesn't it?
Cool.
I'll be really quick here because this is kind of in itself is a 45-minute webinar probably. I think the reality is that we know the impact the pandemic is having on the main insurance lines is going to be significant. Some lines more so than others. If we look at perhaps the three main insurance lines that we talk about in our world of benefits, we know that life assurance, thankfully, the main impact of COVID has been outside the traditionally insured population, but there's probably going to be a small impact nonetheless. I think on medical, there's been lots of commentary around treatment being deferred and whether that's been an issue that's been kicked down the road, and quite what that bubble looks like in 2021 probably does still need a bit of thought. And again, understanding the data and the insights of the market is going to be key to that. I think the one product line that probably has got the most clear vision is around disability insurance, income protection, where certainly concerns around mental health and perhaps even a bubble of MSK claims for people sitting at home in their kitchen, hunched over a computer like I've been for the last 6 months, might be starting to bear in terms of future claims as well. So a lot to think about, and certainly the data and the insight is going to be key to driving decision making and budgeting going forward, I think.
Okay, that's fantastic. So we've just got time for perhaps one more very quick question. So what would you say, what's your number one top tip then for building a resilient workforce?
Do you want to go first, Mark, and I'll follow?
We've just got a very, very brief time for this. So.
Yeah, okay. So if I was just thinking about the top tips, I think probably two key themes here. One, it needs to be rounded. It's not one dimensional. Think about those 5 dimensions of wellbeing we called out earlier, and follow the data. Look at the data to see what it tells you, and that will enable you to drive an informed strategic decision-making strategy.
Yeah, and maybe from my end, like the one thing I'll add to this is that we always need to think about the balance between the organizational strategy and the impact on the employees, and that oftentimes now gets reflected in how we set up, say, remote working strategies. So how do we enable that for our employees and do it in a fair way for everybody? Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, many thanks today to John and Mark. Some really significant learning points here. And don't forget that you can continue the conversation further with our speakers and their colleagues in the exhibition hall and also in our networking rooms during the day. So we've got some more presentations coming up next. So please do go back and check your My Itinerary list, both for what you've got in the next session and what you're planning to visit in our fantastic live vendor presentations, which will be coming after the next presentation. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.